Joining us now, though, talk a little supervision reform, one of my favorite topics. Joining us now is David Safavian, and David Safavian is the Chief Operating Officer of Unity US, a new public policy organization dedicated to delivering solutions based on the principles of individual freedom. I'm for that. Limited government. I'm for that. Free enterprise. I'm for that. And traditional American values. Well, I'm for that too. So we're on the same page and everything. I wish we had him here in Indiana. I wish he was a state senator. He'd be voting yes. But he's joining us now. David, thanks for being with us.
Amen to everything you said, my friend. It's good to hear your voice.
Okay, David, good to hear you too. David, don't have him on screen, have him on the line. And he's the Chief Operating Officer at Unity US. He also serves as Criminal Justice Policy Advisor to CPAC. And my good friends there, Matt and Mercedes Schlappen. David's able to draw on his own personal experience serving time in federal prison to advocate, like me, for policy changes that improve public safety, protect families and victims, reduce recidivism, and maintain fiscal austerity. David, I have been a proponent of finding ways to end recidivism. We have the highest recidivism rate of any free country on the globe. We have the highest prison population on the globe per capita. I mean, it's unbelievable. We have paid prisons and stuff. I mean, the whole thing is just asinine. But then I'm really involved in what is called the Safe Supervision Act, where people that get jammed up, they have to do time, right? They got to, pay the price. They have to pay it by giving up their freedom. And then they do all the right things. And then they get out. They get paroled or whatever. They get out, but then they're under what is called supervision. So, they have to be visited so many times. They have to stay clean, no drugs, no alcohol, urine test. The whole thing is get a job, assimilate back in society, pay taxes. And so a lot of these people are getting supervised where they're doing, after a few months, all the right things. Have a job, not getting in trouble, doing the right thing, being with their families, or, trying to reunite with their doing the right thing. And then they're stuck in this supervision program to nowhere, which hurts their ability to get a job, move up the ladder, and things of that nature. Explain that to us, David.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let me start by saying thank you for mentioning CPAC. I spent 11 years working at CPAC. It's an unbelievable organization. The conference is coming up. Those of you that are able to make the CPAC conference, you will not regret being there. The second thing, about 20 years ago, I got caught up. I was targeted by Democrat prosecutors and got caught up in a political scandal. And I did a year in prison. And I come out, and I thought I had my debt to society paid. I'm ready to jump back into work. And lo and behold, I had 3 years of supervision. I came out of prison in pretty good shape, right? I have a wife, I've got a family, I have a job, no issues regarding drugs or financial improprieties. But, I have the supervision term. So I go and start working on it, and lo and behold, I find out that supervision is almost as oppressive as prison, because what you have is you've got a probation officer that comes knocking at your door, right, to come check on you, and that's the right thing to do for people that have high risk, that are, former violent offenders, things like that. He would come to my office, he'd say, hey, do you know you're working with a felon? Makes it awfully hard to do work in an office when you got your probation officer coming by. And I'm not demonizing probation officers. I think the role they play is incredibly important. But the problem we have is that we've got this government one-size-fits-all solution on probation, right, and supervision. It is, you do your time, 3 years, standard conditions of probation that might or might not apply to everybody, or should or shouldn't apply to everybody. And we don't have any incentives out there to keep people on the straight and narrow to, do the hard work of self-improvement, get off probation, and become fully vested members of society. So what we did, we all were sitting around one night and having a couple of beers and figured out that there's a better way to do this. Now, I'm a hardcore conservative, right? I'm as right as they come. You might be a little liberal for me, Fredericks. And we conservatives, all of us, we've always been for fixing things. We're fixers by nature. We want to fix the tax code. That's tax reform. We want to get rid of Obamacare and fix that. We want to fix the immigration system. Why aren't we focusing on fixing a system where 40% of the people that come out of prison go back in because we're not doing enough to keep them on the straight and narrow? That's the problem we're trying to get at with probation and supervision reform. So, we've got this bill. It's supported by really great Republican members in the House and the Senate. You got Mike Lee and Roger Wicker, two hardcore guys. You've got more than that, but in the House, you've got Laura Lee, who's a former prosecutor and a former judge. You've got Mark Harris, who's a pastor, who is part of the Republican Study Committee. I mean, we've got Freedom Caucus, Republican Study Committee, hardcore members on the right in the House as well. The bill is pretty simple, though. It says a couple of things. It says, okay, first of all, when a judge is sentencing you to your sentence, he should make an individual assessment of what people need rather than just a one-size-fits-all solution. Makes perfect sense, right? You don't need to have supervision or supervision conditions that don't apply to the defendant, to the person that needs supervision. It says that there has to be a way for, if you hold your job, if you do good work, if you go back to school, if you earn your way and prove that you're not a safety risk, that you can get off supervision early. And it creates that mechanism for you to cut your time off. If you've done everything that your probation officer wants you to do and you've had no issues, bam, you should do it. The legislation is supported by law enforcement. We're working with the Trump administration, and what's interesting, and then I'll shut up, what's really interesting is that when we sat down and put the supervision bill together, we looked at one thing. We looked at what Donald Trump did in 2018, which was the First Step Act. In 2018, he created something like the Safer Supervision Program for inmates in prison, that they could earn their way home. They could get home earlier if they did minimal things, actually not minimal, actually going back to school, getting, educated, taking drug treatment and job training. And so Donald Trump put that into place in 2018. And what did we see? We saw that recidivism was cut by 58% because people were incentivized to do the hard work of self-improvement. And all we're doing is we're taking that approach from the First Step Act and moving it over to community supervision so that we get the same results: less recidivism, less spending, and more safety. And that's the last thing I'll touch on.
And we have an act right now. We have legislation pending in Congress that I'm 100% behind. It's called the Safer Supervision Act. You can find out more. Visit safersupervision.com to get more information, to get involved, and to help. And by the way, this segment is partially sponsored by the Reform Action Fund. David, let's get to some of the polling numbers, because a lot of people never really understood on our side how important the First Step Act was into cutting recidivism, like you said, by over 50%. It was a tremendous success that nobody talks about on our side. But I just want to get to polling right now. And Fabrizio did a poll. That's President Trump's own pollsters. And they just released groundbreaking polling showing 80%, 79% of Trump voters support the Safer Supervision Act. Did you find that shocking?
On one hand, I did, because we as conservatives tend, to think criminal justice, that's kind of the crazy lefty issue, right? But then I thought about it more. I thought, again, about how we like to fix things. And the other dynamic that I think you're seeing in those polling numbers, and, we saw 79% Trump voters love it. The other dynamic is voters in America want to see things improve. Sorry, there's a train going by. They want to see solutions to problems rather than people just complaining back and forth, right? And this is one of those examples where we can fix something, make neighborhoods safer, bring it all home, and help people get back on track. And so when they understand what we're talking about, they're like, hey, I'm all on board. So on one hand, conservatives shy away from dealing with criminal justice. For some reason, we don't challenge ideas on criminal justice. We just assume that everything's going right when we know that half of America, almost half of people coming out of prison go back into prison. There's a problem there when 40-something% of people recidivate. what other government program can fail 40% of the time and go on unchanged? But somehow, until Donald Trump, we were allowing that to happen. Anyway, voters want to see solutions. Voters want to see more public safety. This makes perfect sense, especially given the foundation that Donald Trump laid with the First Step Act.
Well, listen, this is also personal to many, many people, because a lot of people get jammed up. I mean, I've got, friends of mine that, ran into some issues, and they go to prison, they come out. But so it's a personal issue. 7 in 10 voters nationally and 8 out of 10 Trump voters have either been personally impacted by the criminal justice system or know someone who has. So this is a very personal issue to many, many people, David.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. And it's, the number you cited is right. 8 out of 10 have some sort of tie, or if they've experienced one way or the other. Let me bring it home another way. Almost half of America has a mother, father, brother, sister, son, or daughter who has experienced the criminal justice system firsthand. 1 in 3 Americans has been through the process somewhere along the way. They've got, whether they were caught with booze when they were a teenager or something along those lines, but they have a criminal record somewhere. So there is a large number of people that have seen the system firsthand, but nobody wants to talk about it. Well, we want to fix it. And that's why you're seeing this huge amount of support for these concepts. And this is what, we're all trying to do is make your neighborhood safer. And when they understand that, they're like, where do I sign on? The other facet here is, Donald Trump in 2020 ran on 2 things. He ran, well, among others, but in the context of safety, he ran on making neighborhoods safer, and he went to places like Kenosha, Wisconsin, where they had those riots, and he said, I'm going to support your sheriffs, I'm going to support your prosecutors, we're going to make you safer. And then he also said, we're also going to fix things with the First Step Act. So he kind of had his cake and ate it too. And what we saw in places like Wisconsin was he increased his vote margin by, in Wisconsin, it was by 800%. It was an unbelievable change in dynamic. What we see with this bill is that 90% of people in those swing districts, you talked about Indiana and that silly person that's decided to go on vacation rather than do his job. Well, 91% is actually the number of voters in those swing districts that we're going to need come next year to retain the House. 91% of them support safer supervision and the principles behind it. 91%. And what we then see is if you ping people and say, hey, if you found out your candidate supported or opposed this bill, how would that change your vote? We saw an 8 times increase in people who would support their politicians, their legislators who supported safer supervision. So, for those policymakers that get on board, they're going to see a return at the box office. They're going to see at the polling booth. They're going to see a giant bump in support, and that is just so important to conservatives as we try to maintain our coalition and maintain control of the House.
Well, listen, there's no question this is a major issue for a lot of people, and we're on the right side of it. David Safavian with us. David is the Chief Operating Officer, Unify US. We're talking about the Safer Supervision Act, and it really builds on President Trump's legacy of public policy for ending recidivism, which has, his first act delivered tremendous results. But the supervision thing, as you lived through it, I mean, you were 3 years on probation. It's not only the fact that they would come to your office and you were at no risk, but there's other people that are out that are on supervision that really need the supervision. I mean, they're struggling. They're getting into trouble. They're doing drugs, whatever. And so it frees up every time you get somebody like yourself off that, it frees up that parole officer to focus more energy on those that need their help. I mean, does that not make sense?
Example, my friend Matt Whitaker. Matt Whitaker is
yes,
he's now ambassador to NATO, but he was the acting attorney general for President Trump. He and I wrote an op-ed, and it talked about this case in California with a young woman named J.C. Dugard, and it is a heartbreaking case. She was kidnapped, held for almost, I want to say it was 18 years. It was a very long time in a shed by a guy named Philip Guarito. Guarito was on supervision and he was on probation in California, or on parole in California. So he was having parole officers come to his house every month, sometimes every week, to check in on him. Now, this guy was a predator. He had this young girl locked in a shed. During the time she was there, he raped her multiple times. She gave birth to 2 children while she was held by this guy. And for the whole time, probation officers were coming by to check on him, and they were so busy with their caseloads, they never thought, I wonder if we should go look in the shed out back where this woman was chained to a wall. Eventually, she got free. Thankfully, she's back in. She's got a lot of work to do. But the bottom line is, when you have these, probation officers that are really doing important work, and I started this conversation kind of taking a little shot at them, and I didn't mean to. These probation officers doing such important work, but if they're flooded with cases, if they've got twice as many cases as the recommended number, they've got more than 100 now for each probation officer. It should be about 50. If you've got everybody on probation, then nobody gets real supervision. And so the point of this bill on the public safety side, to make people safer, is that you've got to take the people that don't need it or that have demonstrated that they are no longer safety risks out of the system, give the pathway to get them out of the system, so that those hard-working law enforcement officers that are dedicated to keeping an eye on people that have real issues, so that they can go and look in those sheds, so they can go and do the intense supervision to make sure that the people that are out aren't committing more crime. And that's why there is such an important public safety factor to the Safer Supervision Act.
Well, David, you're doing the Lord's work trying to get this done. Look, these are conservatives. A lot of conservatives don't understand. They're like, lock them up, put them away. And this has nothing to do with letting criminals out in the street, revolving door like we saw on Rikers Island, where they can't be held, no cash bail. So it has nothing to do with that. I just want to explain to my audience, the Safer Supervision Act, you have already been released from prison, okay? Whether it's a parole board made that decision or your time was up or time for good behavior, the system has released you. But now you're on supervised probation to be sure you're doing the right things, like getting a job. We all know when you get a job, everything goes up in your life. We want you to assimilate back into society. So basically what this act does is it reforms the supervision one size fits all. So it modernizes it and gives people that don't need the supervision to get them off. So more time is spent with those that still need to be looked at, violent criminals and things like that. That's what this act is. It has nothing. Some people say, I just want to lock them up and we don't want them out on the street. These are people that have been released through the system and now they're supervised. That's why this is so critical, because we want every one of our former prisoners that are let out, we want them to get back into society, assimilate, get a job. Job's the whole thing. All the studies show, David, you get a job, you got a better chance of not going back to jail. You start rebuilding things, and that's going to be the key issue. David, we are out of time. Great interview. I'm going to see you again, obviously, on my show, but then we'll see you at CPAC in Dallas, which is going to be at Dallas at the Gaylord there. We're looking forward to that. This segment is partially sponsored by the Reform Action Fund. I want you to go to safesupervision.com to learn more. Safer with an R, safersupervision.com to learn more and get involved. David, thanks for being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, John. We'll see you in Texas.